Chapter 11. Timothy had fashioned a cane for me, and I was now using it to feel my way around the island. I fell down often, but unless I fell into sea grape, it did not hurt. Even then, I only got a few scratches. Slowly, I was beginning to know the island. By myself, keeping my feet in the damp sand, which meant I was near the water, I walked the whole way round it. Timothy was very proud of me. From walking over it, feeling it, and listening to it, I think I knew what our cay looked like. As Timothy said, it was shaped like a melon, or a turtle, sloped up from the sea to our ridge, where the palms flapped all day and night in the light trade wind. The beach, I now believed, was about 40 yards wide in most places, stretching all the way around the island. On one end, to the east, was a low coral reef that extended several hundred yards, awash in many places. I know it was to the east because one morning I was down there with Timothy when the sun came up, and I could feel the warmth on my face from that direction. The sea grape, a few feet tall at the edge of the beach, and higher farther back, grew along the slopes of the hill on all sides. There was also some other brush that did not feel like sea grape, but Timothy did not know the name of it. To the south, the beach sloped gradually into the water. On the north side, it was different. There were submerged coral reefs and great shelves. The water became deep very abruptly. Timothy warned against going into the water here because the sharks could swim close to shore. Timothy said that the water all around the cay was clear and that he could see many beautiful fish. There was brain coral and Oregon pipe coral that the parrotfish would nibble. From what I could feel and hear, our cay seemed a lovely island, and I wished I could see it. I planned to walk around it at least once a day, following the vine rope from the ridge to the beach, then setting out along the sand. I was starting to be less dependent on the vine rope, and sometimes it seemed to me that Timothy was trying hard to make me independent of him. I thought I knew why, but I did not talk to him about it. I did not want to think about the possibility of Timothy dying and leaving me alone on the cay. Because the rain the night before had made us hopeful, I think both of us did our chores with one ear to the sky, listening for the sound of engines. But all day we heard nothing but familiar sounds, the surf, the wind, and the cries of seabirds. That night after dinner, Timothy grumbled, "No aircraft. The island must have a jumbie." "Don't talk nonsense, Timothy," I said. "The evil spirit harass and molest us," he said darkly, "and we do not have a chicken or grains or corn to chase him." I said, "Timothy, you can't really believe in that." My father had told me about Obadiah, or voodoo, in the West Indies. It had come over from Africa, of course. Haiti was the worst of all for it, but there was some practice on the islands. It was mixed up with religion and witch doctors. I knew he was looking at Stew Cat when he said, "Maybe that outrageous cat is the jumbie." "He's just an old cat, Timothy," I protested. Recalling everything that had happened, Timothy said, "He come board the raft and we got separated from all else. Den the young boss eyes got dark, giving us exceeding trouble. Den we float upon this humbug devil's mouth." Angrily I said, "Timothy, Stew Cat is not a jumbie. You let him alone." The old man was silent, and I was suddenly worried for Stew Cat's safety. Timothy stayed by me all night, but in the morning when I awakened, he was gone, and so was Stew Cat. I crawled out of the hut and began to call for Stew. Then I called for Timothy. There was no answer. I went down the hill and headed up the beach toward the reef. Voodoo was silly, I knew, but it was also frightening. I couldn't understand why Timothy thought Stew Cat was the jumbie. I decided to circle the island to find them, using my cane to feel the way to touch the driftwood or coral ledges that the night tide might have uncovered. I moved along the damp sand, calling out now and then. When I reached the north side, Timothy answered, "Marnin', Philip." I asked him where he'd been. He laughed. "There's little place to go here. I've been here on this beach." "Where's Stew Cat?" Timothy was silent. I asked again. "Be getting his own self a lizard, maybe," he answered, but there was something conniving in his voice. All the while I could hear a scraping noise and occasionally a ring of metal. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Cutting an old piece of wood," he replied. Why would he be down on North Beach this early cutting wood? I knew we had plenty for the campfire and the signal fire. "And you haven't seen Stukat?" "Not a air," he said. I wanted to see what he had in his hands, but I didn't have the courage to walk up and touch it. I said, "Timothy, I'm very hungry." I felt his hand on my wrist. He said, "We'll go to the hut." He fixed breakfast, we ate, and then without a word, he slipped away. Usually he kept his hunting knife in the tin box that had stored our biscuits. Also in that box were the dry matches we had left, a few pieces of stale chocolate, and small things that Timothy had salvaged from the beach or the raft. I felt a few nails, the hinges, that had been on the raft's trap door, some short lengths of rope, a piece of cork, several small tin cans, and a small roll of something that felt like leather. Nothing was missing except the knife, and I knew he'd taken it to the North Beach with him. As best I could, I searched around the hut area for Stukat, thinking maybe Timothy had tied him up somewhere. Yet I was certain he'd be meowing if he was within hearing distance. I was positive that Timothy was back on North Beach cutting on that piece of wood, but something told me not to go down there, so I sat by the hut wondering what to do. It was no good trying to convince him that Jumby did not exist, nor was there any way to find Stukat if Timothy had hidden him. The morning hours passed slowly. Once I went down to the East Beach to sit near the signal fire, hoping to hear the drone of an aircraft. Several times over the stir of the wind I thought I heard a faint meow, but I couldn't locate the direction. Maybe all that had happened was beginning to work on an old man's mind. Maybe I was stranded on a tiny, forgotten island in the Caribbean with a madman. If he harmed Stukat because of some silly Jumby thing, I knew he might also harm me. I thought about getting back on the raft and letting it drift to sea again. I was certain that there were enough boards still on top to sit and sleep on. If I could get the water keg down the hill and the last piece of chocolate out of the box, I'd be all right for a few days. I got up and went down to the water, feeling my way toward the reef. I knew that if I kept going that way, I'd touch or fall over the length of lifeline rope that tethered the raft. Timothy had driven a heavy piece of driftwood into the sand so that the raft would not go out to sea with the tide. I walked slowly and carefully, expecting at any moment to feel the rope with my cane, or have it hit against my ankles. I went all the way to the beginning of the reef without finding it. Then I reversed my course and walked in the other direction. Finally, I stumbled over the heavy piece of wood that Timothy had driven into the sand. I felt around it, but the rope was no longer tied to it. He'd cut the raft loose. Panic swept over me, but taking my bearing from the stake, I decided to go out into the water, hoping to find the raft. A few feet offshore, I got another bad scare. I put my foot down, and something moved. In fact, the whole bottom seemed to move. I lost my balance and fell headfirst into the water. I came up sputtering and realized I'd stepped on a skate, that diamond-shaped fish with a stinger tail. I'd done that once or twice at West Point. The skate is kin to the deadly sea ray, but this one was as shocked as I was and swam off to deep water. I went out to my waist, feeling with my hands in all directions, but the raft was gone. I trusted Timothy and kept telling myself that he wouldn't harm me, but it was the whole mysterious Jumby thing that was frightening. And he certainly wasn't acting like the Timothy I'd been living with. In mid-afternoon he returned to the hut. Neither of us spoke. Then I heard him pounding something. The palm fronds on the hut rattled. Whatever it was, he was pounding it into the hut. Having finished, he went away again. When I heard him moving through the sea grape down the path, I got up and began feeling around the framing of the hut. There was nothing on the sides of it, and I decided that whatever he'd attached had to be to the roof. I knew there were several lengths of log over near the campfire, so I approached it, found one of the logs, and rolled it over to the entrance of the hut. I stood on it and felt along the cross frame that held up the roof. In the very center I found what I was looking for. I cried out when the palm of my hand touched something sharp. Then with my fingers I slowly felt around the object. It had a head, I discovered, 4 feet, and a tail. Timothy had spent all that time carving a cat. A stew cat. The nails in it were supposed to kill the evil Jumbie. I felt weak and sat down on the log. Soon he came up the path, dropping Stew Cat into my lap. "Where was he?" I asked. "On the raft, of course," Timothy answered. "I got him off the island till I could chase the Jumbie." "Where's the raft, Timothy?" "'Twas off the shore, Philip. 'Tis back now, and our luck is changed." But it didn't change. It got worse.